Welcome, everybody. We're going to get started now. I'm glad to see such a fine audience today. Thanks for coming out. My name is Mike McGuire. I'm a professor of communications here at Moraine Valley. Today, I'm here with students from my Composition 2 course, which is a research writing course, as many of you know. This semester, my students have been focusing their research and writing on the subject of American poverty. They've been exploring this topic not only through traditional research, but also through a formal collaborative process called deliberative dialogue, through a variety of service learning experiences, and through live events like this one. Today we have assembled a panel of students to discuss American Winter, an award-winning film by Joe and Harry Gantz. For those who may not have seen this film, allow me to set the context by reading the description from the DVD cover notes. American Winter follows the personal stories of 8 families struggling in the wake of the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. Seen through the eyes of families caught in a daily struggle to survive, American Winter powerfully reveals the emotional stories behind America's alarming trend towards a disappearing middle class and a shrinking social safety net at a time of unprecedented need. The latest U.S. Census data shows the largest number of people living in poverty in the history of published poverty estimates, including 16.1 million children. American Winter challenges stereotypes about who turns to social services for help and why, ultimately presenting an intimate portrait of the impact of rising economic inequality and the fracturing of the American dream. As a final introduction to the film before beginning our discussion today, let's view the official trailer. Okay. At this time, I'd like to welcome our panelists to the event today and give each the opportunity to introduce him or herself. Let's start at the far end of the table.
All right. First of all, my name is Francisco Espinoza. I'm majoring in computer science, and during this project, we mostly concentrated on education and the effects of poverty. So that's mostly what we did.
I'm Jake Kendrina, and I'm gonna try and major in criminal justice.
I'm Matthew Cummings, and I don't have a major, but this semester, my group, we worked on education and poverty in close relation to like younger children, like school children.
I'm Felipe Fernandez. I'm majoring in pharmacy, and what we focused on was children in poverty and just general family issues dealing with poverty.
Hello, my name is Daisy Chavez, and this is my second semester in Moraine Valley, and I will be majoring in business administration.
Hello, I'm Nick Strokia. I'll be majoring in information systems.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you. You can clap. It's okay. All right. Okay. We'll wait for him to do something first. Okay. The first question I have for the panel, the film makes the point that helping a poor family is not just an act of charity, but a means of driving the economy. What do you think about this statement? We could start with Francisco.
Well, personally, I think that statement is, it's very logical. We see that in successful communities and countries. A strong middle class always helps the economy. There's only a certain amount of shirts like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and the Koch brothers can buy. They don't help the economy by buying stuff like that. They buy, it's the middle class that buys all this stuff. So by helping the lower class go into the middle class, it makes logical sense that they'll spend more. So that's why I believe it's a very logical statement. Unfortunately, though, I really don't see this happening. It was reported in Forbes. They did an article in Forbes on November 30th of last year, which was titled corporate profits are at an all-time record peak and expected to grow. So my question is, why would they want to help the lower class if they're already experiencing record profits? It doesn't make sense. So from a business standpoint, it doesn't make sense. But from a humanitarian standpoint, I guess it does. One of the biggest advocates for this is Nick Hanner. He was one of the first people to invest in Amazon.com, so he's worth, several $1 million. So he's a very rich man. He's the one that actually brought this idea out first, that to tax the rich more to help the middle class prosper. And then that, according to him, the economy will grow after that. So, I believe it'll work, but, not a lot of people do, so.
I completely agree with Francisco. I think just first of all, as a moral way of approaching it, I completely agree with the statement. It makes complete sense. And it definitely is a means of driving the economy because as he said, or as you could also see in the trailer when they said that it's a means of driving demand because they can purchase things, they'll have more purchasing power, they'll have more money to sustain themselves. They can purchase from a company their products, which will drive more of a demand for it. That business will want to create more, so they'll want to hire more people, thus having more jobs open up. And that's the most logical way I could think of how that would help the economy.
Would other panelists like to comment on that question? Yes? No? Okay, we'll move to the next question then. What role do you think the government should play to prevent, reduce, and alleviate poverty? Keep in mind that many nonprofit and faith community efforts are reliant on government funding. Daisy, would you like to begin?
Okay. I think that the government should take consideration of the idea of communism because we all need equality. We need to allow the poor to rise up and attain equal financial and social status. So they need to use money wisely and so it could reduce poverty. Some of the examples are to raise minimum wage from $7 to 25 cents to $10.10 an hour, which is almost a 40% increase. And it will reduce the number of people in poverty by 900,000. That's 16.5 million people who will benefit from the pay increases. Also, we need affordable housing. Each family, like as we can see in the video, each family dealt with high cost of housing, so that's a big problem. There was a 6% increase from 2009 to 2010 in households that must spend more than 50% of their income on rent. And that's one of the problems that the families had. Like we have the family TJ and Tara. They had to choose between paying their mortgage or their bills, and it shouldn't be like that. We should be able to afford housing and afford for food and taking care of our families. We need job opportunities. We have a lack of jobs. We need more jobs available full-time. We need to reduce the expensive transit systems because most of the poor people use it to get to their jobs. Another example is we need more social and community services, which provide food, shelter, like churches, and other necessary materials. Like we can donate or volunteer. We need Medicare, unemployment insurance, and welfare. Another one is to divert funds equally. We need to reduce taxes for the poor and raise them for the rich. We need higher taxes on higher incomes so that the poor has a chance of a better life. Another one, most importantly, is the education. I think that's the best road out of poverty. We need equalized education. For example, most urban schools are always underfunded, and we also need cheaper college tuition for brighter futures. And I think those are examples that could help us alleviate poverty in America.
Other panelists, please.
Yeah, I'm just gonna add on to what Daisy said about like education and raising the minimum wage, and I think that's probably something that's really important to do. You know, raising the minimum wage, because you know, $7.50, $7.25 is definitely not enough for somebody. Maybe who's by themselves working 40, 50 hours a week, but not if you have kids or if you're living, you know, with other people. It's definitely not enough, and I think you know, it isn't gonna be enough just to raise the minimum wage. Because she also talked about, you know, people need better jobs. And how you could raise the minimum wage, how long is it going to be before inflation catches up with you and suddenly, you know, sure, you raise it to $10 and then in 5 years, you're going to have to raise it to 15 because of inflation. So instead of raising the minimum wage, why don't you could create more jobs, but one way to do that is to have an education, you know, reform. And you know, we need more people going to college. It's definitely way too expensive, and I don't see the government doing it personally. But you know, as the people of this country, we need to you know, strive for that education reform, and we need, you know, instead of whatever the percentage of people going to college is, we need to double that.
Going off of what Daisy had said earlier, I completely agree with what she and Matt said just now. Another thing that she had pointed out was the tax issue with the tax cuts that the top 1% get. Even though there's the supposed statement that everyone gets charged the same amount of state, federal, and local taxes, there's a study that was actually done by the Center of Budget and Policy Priorities, where the bottom fifth actually pay about 15 to 18% of their total income in federal, state, and local taxes, whereas the top 1% only pays about 7 to 9%. If you would take the funds that are inverted into the tax cuts for the rich, or even in the funds that go into things like safety nets, like food stamps, I know it sounds radical to take away funds from that, but if you would invert those kinds of funds into just into giving tax cuts for the bottom percent, then that would be a very direct way of helping their situation.
I mean, Daisy brought up a point about changing the economic structure. I mean, I think she mentioned communism. I don't know if I agree fully with that. I mean, I think more of a socialist community would be a little bit better. I mean, I completely agree with the rising cost in education. I mean, it doesn't make sense how much it's gone up, yet people are still getting paid the same. So it doesn't make sense. As far as the tax for the wealthy, I mean, it's on average they pay 15% on their capital gains. I mean, they're able to hide this, you know, through other different, you know, government that, you know, regulations or whatever, or tax breaks. So I mean, I think what I want to see the government do is actually, I mean, regulate tax breaks. You know, I mean, these small businesses, quote unquote, that are multi-million-dollar corporations are not small businesses, but they get all these tax breaks like small businesses because of the definition of a small business, and that's not correct. I mean, for them to get away with paying less taxes than most middle class percentage-wise, I mean, that doesn't make sense. And I mean, I completely agree, like I said earlier, with the economic structure change. Unfortunately, I don't know if a lot of people want that change, so, you know, we'll see what happens.
Going off of what Matt and Daisy said, I believe that the education reform plan is a key aspect to the future, because seeing that nowadays people find it hard to find a job without any education. The only way you can really get a good paying job is to at least have an associate's or better, and an associate's is still getting really close. People need to learn that we need to send people to college in order to get them a well-paying job and to reduce the amount of poverty. With the education reform plan, that is something we could do, that we can give people an equal chance and equal opportunity, the same as we have gotten.
Jake, did you want to chime in on this one?
No, I think they covered just about everything.
All right, Jake. Okay, why don't we take our next question? Do you think the American dream changed over the past 50 years? Consider what it was for your parents or your grandparents. What does it mean to you today? We could start with Matt.
Yeah, I think it definitely has changed over the last 50 years. It's changed drastically. Personally, if you go back, in my family, 2 or 3 generations, my grandparents, they came over here from Europe, on a boat, and they had absolutely nothing, and they did quite well for themselves. They, they worked hard, and they built up, and they were able to save, and you can do that, in the early 1900s. I mean, you can't do that now, or and some people do it now, but it's increasingly harder. And I think for them, the American dream was come over here, work really hard, and then you're good. But now, I mean, if you saw the trailer, and all those families, they tried to find jobs. Some of them, they had jobs. It's minimum wage. They're working 10, 12-hour shifts a day. They're working extremely hard, and they can't make ends meet. So the American dream, I think if it's not dying, or if it's not dead, it definitely is dying.
Yeah, the American dream. I mean, I haven't lived long enough, I guess, to see the changes from decades ago to now. But it was pretty interesting. I was having a conversation with a coworker, and she's from back in the day, let's say. And she was telling me about how she would go after school, after high school, and get a burger and fries. It would cost her maybe about like $1. And it was a good meal. And I know back in the day, I mean, the dollar had, everything was cheaper, right? But I mean, the average in 1968, the minimum wage was about $1.60, but its real value translated now with inflation is about $10.69. So the amount that you could do with the money that they got back then was a lot more. It was about making it and living well, not just making it by. And I think if you would see today, in 2009, the minimum wage was $7.25, and it has a real value over the past couple years of only about a 60-cent difference to $7.89. So I think the American dream has definitely changed. And I could go back to asking my parents, even my grandparents, about it, and they'll tell me the same, that it's gotten a lot harder. It hasn't been about just being comfortable. You used to come here and think, I'm going to have a job, I'm going to have the white picket fence, right? You're going to have a dog. But, I mean, now it's just surviving. That's what the dream has become.
Personally, in my own opinion, I believe that it hasn't really changed over the past 50 years, seeing that my parents, they came with the same goals I did, is just to get a steady paying job and be able to take care of themselves and be dependent on each other, on their families that they have. And for me, it is now, it's the same as it was for them, I feel like, because I want to be able to go and get a good education and a good job and be able to support my family and live comfortably.
I mean, I think the American dream is it's still there. It's just more expensive now. So, I mean, it's there. It's just a lot, like I said, more expensive. I mean, not only that, but the American dream has changed. It's not the same what it used to be, buying a house, getting an education, getting a good, decent job. It's now, I mean, the movie says it very well. I mean, it's to survive to the next day for some of the lower income people, and that's not what I think the American dream is supposed to be. I think as a community, as members of this community and this country, we have to care for the lower class people that we sometimes tend to forget. And I mean, I think it's the government's responsibility to keep that going, especially the American dream. They should keep that going. So
I don't think survival is a great way to describe it, because that implies like they're going to die without all the things they have. But I think the American dream is indeed that to keep what you have. Like, even if it's just a small house with like 2 bedrooms or even just one, to have that is the American dream at this point in our economy.
Would others on the panel like to, maybe we're speaking about this question kind of generally, would anybody like to speak personally? What do you hope to achieve? What is your dream as an American?
Personally, I mean, I think I am living my American dream. I have a job, I do okay for myself. I'm getting to go to college, which how many people in America get to do that? Not everybody. And I'm trying to better myself for my future. So personally speaking, I think I am living my own personal American dream.
I think I do agree with Matt because it is really hard for other people to actually go to college because of the high tuition. So I do consider myself reaching to the American dream while because I get to attend college even though it's a high tuition.
Okay, thank you. This next question starts with a reference to the film in particular. Pam, in the film, who is forced to move into her mother's apartment with her husband and 2 sons, doesn't tell anyone about her family struggles. She is ashamed of her family's crisis, and her friends are unaware of how difficult her life has become. Is it possible that some of your friends are experiencing the same sorts of problems? If you were in the same situation, would you feel too ashamed to ask for help? Why do you think people feel this kind of shame? Nick, we'll start with you.
The problem that occurred to me when I asked myself these questions is that you can never really be sure whether or not that your friends share the same situation. I believe many people would feel ashamed when they cannot fill a goal nor do something on their own, precisely when they know they are old enough to be able to care for themselves and others without being dependent on another person. It's really hard to ask my parents now to fund my expenses. How could you expect them to be so willing to accept you when you have a family of your own? In my personal opinion, seeing that I was lucky enough to be brought up in a well-mannered environment, I believe it would be even harder to see myself in that situation. And seeing that I was given a good chance while others are not given the same chance as I am, I believe it could be embarrassing to tell your family and friends because each person has a different opportunity and chance. And if you were given a better opportunity or chance, you should be able to use that to your fullest extent and put it towards something.
I definitely think I agree with everything Nick said. The thing about people, like your friends that you see around you, your family, is that as humans, we're really good at lying, at holding things in, and not showing how we feel. And the reason why I think that people feel this kind of shame is because no one hopes to be in that situation. Nobody thinks, oh, I'm going to be poor one day, and I'm going to just admit it. No one says that. No one's proud to think that. No one wants to be in that position. And especially if 2 weeks ago, a week ago, a day ago, you were living comfortably watching TV, and now you're just sitting there thinking how you're going to make it to the next day. That drives a lot of shame in you. You wouldn't want to just go out and ask your neighbor or ask your parents, as was said, for to help you pay the electric bill. If I was in that situation, I couldn't say how I would react because I'm not in that situation, thankfully. But in the end of the day, I would just immediately think that what matters most is getting by and just swallow my pride.
I mean, I agree with how he said they're living comfortably 1 minute and then the next they're not. I mean, I think that's the actual problem. A lot of people don't know that there is a very thin line between making it and not making it. The poverty line is very thin. I mean, you could be a middle-class citizen one day and literally lose your job the next, and you're down below the poverty level. So that's the problem. A lot of people, I don't think that they're afraid to admit it. Is a lot of people don't know that they're in that poverty level, that they don't know that you know, if they lose their job, it's done. You know, a lot of people don't have, you know, great amount of savings in the bank account just in case something happens. And yeah, I mean, I believe a lot of people don't come out and say it. I mean, it could be the way society has portrayed people that ask for help. I mean, they in the film, I mean, we see people, maybe not in the film, but you know, I hear a lot where, you know, they're considered lazy sometimes. They're considered, you know, these bad different terms that are not true, but that's what society has labeled people that need help. It's lazy, and that's not necessarily true. So I mean, I think the biggest thing is just making sure people are educated on the thin line between, I mean, poverty and, you know, the middle class. So that's what I think.
If I could just ask a little follow-up here. I'm curious what the panel might think about the roots of what it seems to be very common, this idea of embarrassment or shame and having to ask for help around these issues. Do you think that's in some way rooted in sort of American ideals, this idea of individualism, of the sort of self-reliant, self-sufficient individual? I know this is kind of off script, but I was just wondering what you guys might have to say about that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd say as a society, as like an American society, people want to be independent. You know, we don't want to ask for help. We don't want the help of others. We want to know that, you know, we're fine on our own and we can pay our own way in the world. And the fact is, you know, sometimes you do need help, and, you know, it's okay. You don't have to do it by yourself all the time. But as a society, I think that is what people like to do. They like to be independent.
I also agree. I mean, I was kind of thinking about it. I would think that a lot of people want to come to America because they want to make it out and be independent from whatever situation they were in the past. And when they're placed in their same shoes again, needing help again, it's I think that could definitely contribute to them not wanting to get help from others, because they would resort back to how they used to be before they wanted to come to America.
Okay, thank you. Our next question, Jake, we're going to start with you on this one, okay?
All right.
All of the children in the film felt anxiety and guilt about watching their parents struggle to house and support them. We saw some of this in the trailer, actually, as well. In watching their parents struggle to afford housing, what lessons do you think the children are learning about the world? Are these lessons harmful or beneficial?
I'm going to start on a good note and name some of the beneficial things that I think they'd take away from it, and that's things like working hard to get where you're at. Their parents are working hard right now, and they're still not always able to produce as much as they should for their family. And they're also learning the importance of money, because their parents are in poverty right now, and that's because they don't have enough money to get out of it. But I feel like the most important thing, like not the most important, but the most harmful thing they could take away is like a feeling of helplessness and hopelessness, because after seeing their parents try so hard to provide for them, they still can't do it, and they may just feel abandoned by, like, after watching so many other families prosper and other kids affording like the luxuries of life, they can't do it. I feel like that's going to take quite an emotional toll on the kids. And according to a research thing I looked up, it was by UC Davis. Household income has a direct effect on a child's social competence. So by being brought up in poverty, they're actually at a disadvantage socially, and that can actually prevent them from getting jobs later, which would also just keep the cycle going of poverty.
Yeah, I completely agree. There was one of the kids in the film had said that he's 14 and that he stays up at night and he worries about and he stresses about when he has a family and how he's going to support them if he's always going to be in that situation. And this kid's 14. You're not supposed to be thinking that kind of thing when you're 14. You're supposed to be going out, having friends, hanging out with them, being a kid. And if you worry about that kind of thing early on, it can cause developments in how well you can socialize and things like that. I also think that they definitely learn beneficial things, because you learn essential skills like efficiently conserving water, electricity, food. You learn that the world isn't going to be easy, or at least it's not supposed to be. You learn essential skills that can definitely carry them on in their lives. The effects of them can be pretty harmful, though, I think, like with the development of their social skills can definitely be hindered by that.
Yeah, I think this question, it shows the importance of education. In the film, we see how Shannon was telling Chelsea, which is her daughter that's sick, she was telling her that she wants her to be a kid and just be a kid, don't worry about anything. However, she sat there and talked to a bill collector right next to her, and she's hearing all this stuff. And I just found that odd. I'm like, you're contradicting yourself. You want her to have her childhood, yet you let her see all this stuff that you're struggling with. Personally, I don't think I think that's where education comes in, and a better parenting skills. Better critical thinking skills. And I think I personally don't think a kid should go through that, like they all said. It's something that I'm not saying hide them from it, but let them live their life and, of course, understand the value of certain things, but they shouldn't be too informed of what's going on, financially or even, in another dispute or whatever. So, I mean, yeah, I definitely agree that they should not, they should live their, their childhood basically. So,
Going off what Francisco said, I do believe that it could be more as harmful than in any way good, seeing that if I were to have a family of my own, I wouldn't want them to know my own personal situations. Like, they're my kids. You're supposed to love them and keep them happy. As you saw in the trailer, those kids were saying that they would sometimes cry because that they felt as if they were taking their parents' money. And personally, I don't think that's how kids should feel. That's their parents. They should feel comfortable. Like, they shouldn't know about these things until they're a little older to feel more appropriate with the situation. The only things they could really get out of this situation is that they learn how to cope with the situation. I mean, if they were to ever come into that situation themselves, then they would know what to do and who to ask help from, where to go, and maybe their parents could help them through the same thing because they were too part of the same situation.
I somewhat agree with that because, yes, they're going to feel like there's no hope or help, but I feel like it's a 50-50 situation where they also learn beneficial lessons where they take education seriously. They want to attend school and have a career afterwards, and also learn how to save money and be able to take care of themselves and their families.
But going off what Daisy said, how could you expect your children to go to school and learn what they have to when at home they're dealing with all this stress and emotional distress to them and their families? Like, people nowadays are coming to school and you always see that there's a lot of kids that are having problems because they always have financial problems at home, family problems, people dying in the family. There's always something that's going on that will affect the student in school. How could you expect them to really go out and get an education if they're always at home hearing every day that their parents can't eat because of them, or that they're going to have to go to another food shelter or stay somewhere for the night different?
Yes, that is true, but I see it like it's a 50-50 situation, so they could like learn beneficial lessons from that. They will take education seriously after seeing their parents like suffering or going through poverty.
I mean, I see where Daisy's coming from as far as like a 50-50, lesson, I guess. But the thing here is like, I mean, me growing up, my parents weren't, these high educated people. So when I was first, growing up, I wanted to be like them. It wasn't never looking above them. I always wanted to be just like them. I didn't want to be better until I got older. When I was 16, 17, 18, that's when I decided that I wanted to do something for me. So I think as a child, you look at your parents and you see this like, this superhero basically that you want to be just like them. So if all you're portraying is somebody that's struggling, somebody that's getting by, somebody that's using social services, not in a negative way, but that's using them, it just gives it gives the kid the bad goals, I would say. But I understand what you mean about 50-50, but I think there's an age difference where you start noticing that when you're more mature, you start noticing that you want to be better, you don't want to be the same. So that's what I would have to say.
Thank you. Let's move to our next question, and it may very well be related in some ways. Felipe, we're going to start with you on this one. What socio-political structures, conditions, and policy decisions do you think affect poverty and joblessness in America? If you could change one socio-political structure or condition to fight poverty and homelessness, what would it be?
Socio-political structures and policies. The ones that I think most affect poverty and joblessness are how we had mentioned earlier about the inequality and how wealth is distributed in the country, and how the tax breaks are given to the top 1% in favor of the top 1% and are made to hinder the lower classes. I mean, these are things that they always try to mask in like the media. They'll try to say that that everyone gets the same tax breaks, but I mean, if you carefully look at it, it's obvious to see that places like organizations and wealthy people are bribing government leaders and politicians to make these kinds of policies that will benefit the upper class because they're part of the upper class. And this kind of problem goes over not only just poverty and joblessness, but over all kinds of issues, because these are people that make the decisions in our country, and they affect everything, not just poverty. If there was one political structure, condition that would change, is so that that kind of corruption wouldn't be in our political leaders and government officials, so that they could not be bribed with money just so that they can make policies that will end up benefiting them in the first place. It's with the tax breaks. They'll say if like when we go back to the idea of trickle-down economics, let's give the wealthy even more money. It'll eventually fall down to the poor. That makes no sense at all whatsoever. It will make a ton more sense to give the lower class money to fuel the economy so that the corporations can keep producing more, have more jobs open up, have everyone else have more job opportunities. That's the most efficient way to do it. If you take out that corruption, that those decisions that they make involving money just to benefit themselves, that would be the thing I would change most about to help poverty, and more than that too.
Well, I mean, just to throw something in, I mean, I think the politically correct way to say bribery is lobbying. I mean, a lot of these,
Yes.
just to keep it, politically correct. But yeah, they do. I mean, a lot of the big corporations do lobby like heavily and about passing, bills that benefit them, and I think that's the problem. I mean, there's too much money in Congress. There's too many corporations in there. I mean, as far as like the question, I mean, they want us to think of something to change, but there's so many things you have to change. I mean, the thing is that the government is so afraid to tax the job creators because they're afraid that they're going to take their jobs to other countries, and I think that's a bad way to think about it. I mean, there's been many attempts to pass, bills and stuff like that to try to tax companies that take their jobs out of here, which makes sense. But the reason that they don't go through is because of lobbying, because they have corporations that hire these people to go into Congress and try to, I would say bribe them, I guess, but try to, get them to switch to their side. So I think that's one thing. I mean, there's a lot of tax breaks. There's a lot of, one thing that I would say is I think they should audit big corporations on a yearly basis, not actually, wait till they, want to audit them. I think it should be something that's done every single year to see where their money's going, because, there's ways that they could hide their money or their profits and stuff like that. And I think just basically changing and educating society on the bad perception of taxes. Everybody hears taxes, they're like, oh my God, taxes. But when taxes, you got to understand that taxes are not that evil. I mean, yeah, for many people, as soon as they hear taxes, oh my God, they're going to raise our taxes. But what we mean by raising taxes is not to the lower middle class. We want the wealthier class to pay more taxes. The people that are making 250 grand and above to pay more taxes, not people that are making 50 grand or 30 or 20 or less than that. That's what it is. And the problem here is educating yourself on what a tax is and how you get taxed, because a lot of people hear tax and, like I said, oh my God, no, taxes are going up. But that's not the truth behind it. The people that are scared of it are the people at the top 1%. They're the ones that are scared of taxes, and they're the ones that lobby against it. So my thing is just, we got to stop these loopholes in the tax system and basically just educate ourselves. And that's why I chose and we chose to research education. And what we mean by education is how well Americans are educated on poverty and policies and tax and stuff like that. So I think we should just educate ourselves.
Just real quick, I think an even more politically correct term is donating. But it makes complete sense that, because I saw on how news reports, the media right now, how they try to do it is they'll say, no, taxes are equal. I mean, you could even see the wealthy pay 98% of all the federal taxes that come in. But that makes just complete sense. If you have someone that makes over 70% of the total country's income, they're going to pay most of the taxes too. It doesn't matter if they pay 5 or 10%. The point is, if we get the wealthy to pay more in the taxes because they have more to give, that's going to generate a lot more revenue for the country in its entirety.
Okay. Others? Nick, you look poised. You look like you're ready to say something. Okay. Well, let's move to our next question then. And this kind of brings our focus more directly back to the film in some ways. So sometimes when we talk about poverty, people picture folks standing at an intersection every day holding a sign asking for money. This film shows people who are trying hard to participate in the economy, applying for jobs, working 12-hour shifts in low-paying jobs, still not having enough money for food, and still facing either losing their home or the prospect of losing their home. How has American Winter changed your perceptions of the working poor and unemployment? What myths about poverty has this film unearthed for you? And whoever would like to begin.
So I used to be one that I'll admit, I mean, I always knew poverty was more than just people standing at an intersection, but when someone would say the word poverty, I would think of that. I would think of a person in raggedy clothes holding a sign wanting quarters. And I'm ashamed to think of that, I'll admit. But this movie the film has really showed me that I need to be more aware, because there are people out there that are in these kinds of situations and you won't even realize it. I mean, I could look out at just a general park and I wouldn't even know if people are having these kinds of situations. You just never know. And it makes me more aware and think about more what I need to do in terms of helping out a random stranger, where it doesn't just have to be handing someone a couple dollars because they're begging for it. But if you never know if someone's in these kind of situations, maybe just sharing a smile with them, holding the door, because they might be having a terrible day because they're in these kinds of situations. And that can make a big difference in itself.
One thing that, I always used to think about poverty, like when I heard that, poverty was an issue, I would say, well, maybe if all the people in poverty just got a job, it wouldn't be an issue anymore. But after watching this movie and, going through this class this entire semester, having a job, a minimum wage job, it's not enough. And I mean, it's kind of sad for this country because, it is such a great country. But that's one myth about poverty that kind of, got unearthed for me, is that, well, if people just get jobs, then we won't have poverty. That's not true. A lot of people have jobs and still live in poverty. So it's kind of sad.
I mean, growing up, I would always think, I'm like, yeah, poverty doesn't exist here. That's somewhere in Africa or South America, and that's the ignorance that we sometimes have when it comes to issues like this. And I mean, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but we have to educate ourselves. We have to understand what poverty means, and basically understand that it exists within us. It's around us. I mean, it's in this community, it's in Payless, it's in Oak Lawn, it's in Orland, it's in all these communities. It's here. So my biggest, I mean, it was an eye opener for me seeing that. We have all these myths of the lazy lower class, and in the movie we see how people look and look and look for jobs, yet nothing's there. We hear the myth of uneducated lower class, yet we see people with degrees that still can't find a job. I mean, that's the myth right there. We see that the myth of education makes us better financially, and unfortunately, I mean, sometimes that's not the case depending on what you decide to do with your life. So I think there's a lot of myths that I personally, I hate saying, but I thought of myself. And it's just, one more time, it's about educating yourself on the topic. And then once you do that, then you're able to see the difference and you're able to, hopefully find the solution. So, I mean, just, don't listen to the myths. So,
Along with what Francisco said about the lazy lower class, that's one of the things that changed my mind with the film. all those people were looking for their jobs consistently, and they were like, I remember one of the men was talking to the camera about how he called every single company in the phone book, and just none of them were hiring. So that's just like what the economy's giving us right now. And one of the CEOs for the company was saying how it's not that the people don't want to work. Most people will work, and they would prefer to work other than just collecting income off of like the programs that we have set for the poor. They want to work, and there's just no jobs for them.
And if I could add on that, it wasn't in the trailer, but if you go and you watch the entire movie all the way through, one of the ladies, her name was Deidre, she had a college degree. She had a bachelor's degree. Still couldn't get a job. So it's not, it is tough. And she was forced to donate plasma or go scrappy, and she'd try to, she'd bring a couple people, and they'd try to get like old refrigerators or washing machines, and maybe if they had 4 people and they got $100 and it was like a Saturday, and she'd make $25 for the day, and she had a college degree, and she had to do this. So
Don't get disappointed though. Still go to school, right? So
Right, absolutely.
don't stop.
I believe generally people get the wrong depiction of like homeless people or poverty in America. People generally think that, yeah, that's the people that are standing on the street corners asking for change. But most people don't know that they are just like us. Every day they're trying to find a job, trying to thrive for education. They're trying to make a better life for themselves, yet like people aren't given the same opportunity and chances as we are. It's a lot harder for some people that weren't like growing up in a well environment and given a good education. I believe that, like, for example, in the movie or in a show we watched, there's a gentleman that goes around saying that he wants to help the poor or to donate to the poor, whereas people are just walking past them. I'm sure a few of you have seen this video. And then in the next clip, it's a man making fun of the poor, saying like, oh, like, why do we even have them? Let's get rid of them. And then that's when people start to pay attention. Like, people are well aware of the situation that's going on, yet they have like no consideration to change it. They just let it go as if it's nothing. If it's something hidden in a back alley. And that's what I believe, that if we could come together and change, that could really put a difference to it.
I think Nick's referring to a PSA video that you could find on YouTube if you Google F the poor. There's a, like he was saying, there's a man wearing a sign that says that, and everybody's confronting him about this, and they're all up in arms, and it's a whole scene. And then the next scene, he's wearing a sign that says "Help the poor," and he's trying to collect money, and everyone's just walking right past him. So, okay. Well, there's one other question I want to make sure we at least touch on before we move to our final question and some time for audience questions. So this last question has to do with domestic violence. Okay, and it's a big topic, but maybe we could, just spend a couple of minutes on it here. For families, domestic violence is the third leading cause of homelessness. Individuals who experience intimate partner violence lose a combined total of 8 million days of work every year. Many women become homeless when they choose to leave an abusive relationship, especially if they have few financial resources. Frequently, abusers will control access to the family's money, forcing women to leave the home without any resources. Women living with domestic violence are frequently cut off from social support networks. This means they leave. This means that, they are more likely to face homelessness when they leave. Women who live in financially insecure families and communities are more likely to experience domestic violence. Now, that's a lot of information, but considering all of this, why do you think the issue of domestic violence remained unaddressed in the film? Whoever would like to respond.
One main reason, when I got to think about it a little more, it was the film is about the working poor, and yeah, domestic violence is a huge issue, but you don't have to necessarily be poor to suffer from that, or to be abused by somebody. You could be well off and still get abused. So maybe it just didn't quite fit with the movie, or maybe, you know, the producers, directors, they didn't want to touch on such a, you know, like it is a touchy issue, but, and they could probably be a film in itself, but the film, you know, was mainly about the working poor, and I don't think you necessarily don't have to be poor to, you know, be abused, you know, and have domestic violence in your family.
Yeah, I think for one, it's an issue that's more detached from the other issues surrounding the families in the film. Aside from that, I just think it's more of a topic that is not so easy to correct. With all the other issues, with all the other families, you can see how it directly ties with the economic status of the country. And that kind of can lead to how you can make a solution that applies to everyone. With domestic violence, is more of a personal issue, I would say, that could definitely be resolved with other people helping out, but I don't think it's an issue that can be solved in the same way as the other families. Aside from that, it's also a really sensitive issue that I feel would be hard to document, in my opinion.
I mean, personally, I think kind of what he said, it's hard to document. The reason is not every husband or wife are going to admit, oh, yeah, I beat my husband or my wife. So it's hard to get people to admit. Just like admitting people that admit that they're in poverty, many women won't say that they are in an abusive relationship because of society's view on it and stuff like that. So the reason I think it should have been said is because, I mean, it's a fact that women make less than men. I mean, it's like a 76-1 or something like that, 76 cents to every dollar that a male makes. So I think it should have been said. And just because of that, because if a woman loses, you know, her husband's income or whatever, and if she's not working or not making as much as he was, I mean, it right away, that thin line's right there. They're immediately going to, you know, the lower class or, you know, struggling to make ends meet. So the reason I don't think it was there, though, it's because of that, because a lot of people won't admit that they're in an abusive relationship, you know, afraid of whatever it's going to happen to them.
It's a very complicated issue for sure, but it's being the third leading cause of homelessness in this country. Domestic violence, I think it points out that poverty is a complex issue, and there's a lot of related issues, and a lot of things that compound the problem. With domestic violence, perhaps it's just another level of isolation and shame that only perpetuates the problem. People have trouble speaking about being poor, you know, and I would imagine people who are in abusive relationships are very reluctant to come forward with that information. Well, our final question that is for all of the panelists. Given all that you know and have been studying about American poverty this semester, what is one thing you would like to impart to the audience today? Are there actions you would like individuals to take?
If there's something I would like to give the audience today is that really it's just, you know, give a little bit of your time. I mean, no matter how much it is, it's always something. No matter what you do, you're always helping someone in need. Even if you don't know the people personally, like, you know that you're making a difference. No matter how big it is or how small it is, you know that you could say that you officially made a difference towards someone's family. You made someone happier. I think it's important that you could just at least go out there and volunteer just once a week, once a month. Any little bit can help.
I feel like we should all care more and volunteer in community services, donate, and just send out for themselves and everyone else. So because we need a little help, and it's just helpful for everybody and yourself as well.
I think that the thing that I would most like to say is that, well, people that are living in these kinds of situations sometimes have a hard time getting their voice across about the issues that they're really in. And I think the biggest action that one could take is speaking out for them, going out and volunteering, also in the way that you would go to like a soup kitchen or something like that to volunteer, but in the way of getting the message across to the communities, making them aware and making them care. Because if that's done, I mean, you can't have a campaign, let's say for a presidential campaign, you can't have a campaign without people there spreading the word, saying why this cause is important. So if people go out there and spread this word about this very real situation that affects us directly, then the only way to really fix it is to speak out for it.
I'm not going to ask any of you to, donate time or donate your money. If you want to, that's great. That is really great. It does help. But I'm not even going to ask you anything. I'm going to challenge you to do a small favor for somebody. Maybe it's they drop their pencil in class and you pick it up for them, or they drop their math book and you pick it up for them, or everyone's going to leave this building at some point. If someone's walking behind you, hold the door open for them. Do a kind favor. It does make a difference.
Me to go. I mean, for me, the basic thing that I've noticed with this generation, it's we don't care as much as other generations did, and I hate saying it. I mean, we have generations in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s that they got all this stuff done. They went through college, they got it lowered, they declared the war on poverty, they did all this stuff, but it's because the people like us wanted it. So what I challenge you guys is you have to care. Many in this room, I mean, I hate saying it too, but might not care about the subject, but this is your country and you should do something about it. If you don't see something's right, you have to talk. You have to say what you really feel, and you actually have to let it be known. You can't just stay quiet. You can't sit on the sidelines. I mean, my biggest thing is you have to speak your mind. You got to stop judging the lower class. If you are one of those, I mean, you have to educate yourself on the subject, and most of all, you have to care. You have to show that you care. You have to, wake up. I mean, like I said, not everybody here is going to care, but as long as we get a couple people to care, I think that's the main objective. So I hope somebody does, and speak your mind, like I said. So
I think it's just what we have to do is get the government to start working again. Like our Congress has passed less than half of the amount of bills that previous generations of Congress have passed, and that's just terrible. It doesn't even have to be about poverty, but it just has to be about making America better. And of course, that poverty will be touched upon in that process, but we just need to get Congress moving again because they're not doing enough right now.
Thank you, panelists. At this time, why don't we open up the floor to the audience members if they would like to ask any questions of the panelists. We'll have a mic going around, so let me grab the mic or ask one of our fine multimedia folks to grab a mic. Thank you.
Yeah. I'll take it, I guess. Well, the first thing I want to say is just, I mean, I understand the whole short-term, long-term, fix to poverty, but I think a short-term is better than no. A short solution is better than no solution. So by getting the ball rolling, we could start doing something. So that's the first part of your question. That's what I think. As far as education, I don't mean education like traditional school, class, grades. And so I don't mean that education. What I mean is educating yourself on a topic that's very important to this community. I don't mean correct. I mean, yeah, that's some form of communism, but I mean the thing here is you're not. There's a difference between a higher, wealthier person getting taxed less percentage-wise. We're talking about percentage here. We're not talking about money because obviously 15% of $1 million is more than 15% of $30,000. So that's not what we're talking. We're not talking about that. We're talking about why do they get to pay less in percentage-wise than in total monies. But I mean, I agree with you as far as education and educating. But what I mean about educating, it's not educating yourself in school. I mean educating yourself on the actual topic. That's going to create awareness. A lot of people here didn't know all these facts about poverty. They don't know these facts they don't know that it's happening in their own community. That's what I mean about educating. Educate yourself on what's happening in your community. Don't have this mind that I had before doing all this research, thinking that this doesn't happen in the U.S. That's what I mean by education. But I mean, I respect your ideas, and I mean, we obviously have different, but that's fine.
But before we get into a full-fledged debate here, actually, the lady sitting in the front row had a question or something to say. So, the question or statement was in regards to helping the like the children with education and in terms of like with technology and they're the future sort of. So, and I mean, I think my answer will kind of explain the question too. I think the problem is, you know, we have the generation now is in poverty. It's going to be hard to get them out of poverty. What we can do is help future generations, and then that is a chain reaction in itself, okay? Because, you know, maybe a generation now has kids and they're in poverty, but if their kids get out of poverty, then their kids have kids, and those kids can then go to college, won't be in poverty, and then, you know, our country will slowly, over the long term, get itself back on track.
I think we have time for maybe one more question.
Yes, sir. Personally, I feel as if I were to relate myself to one of the families, that in a way we all relate to them all, because like we each are people with emotions. Like any of us can be put through that situation. It's just you don't know. And I believe is that, I mean, it could happen to any one of us. So when I was asked that very same question, for my answer is that I felt as if I was almost connected to all the families. Like either way, they all felt the same thing. They were all going through the same situation, and that's personally like how I understood it.
Yeah, I feel like if anything, I feel like I personally closely relate to Jeanette and Gunnar. What happens was that the husband had died unexpectedly, and the way I can relate to that most is because when I was younger, my dad actually had left us, leaving us in a pretty bad situation for a while. So I can kind of relate most to the kind of things that they had to deal with.
Well, we're just about out of time, so I wanted to just take a second to thank our panelists today. This is not always an easy topic to talk about, and it certainly isn't an easy topic to talk about in front of an audience. So thank you for your courage for coming up here today and sharing your honest ideas. Thank you to our audience for asking your questions and being here. And thanks to the excellent staff in the library and multimedia for helping us out. Let's keep the dialogue going.
And thank you to Mike McGuire for putting this together.